Hello and welcome to Icaria. We're back again for the third episode. A bit has changed since then. Among other things, we've released, which is why it's been a bit of time to get this video out. The release cycle was kind of busy. And a bunch has changed. In terms of the big thing here is that I'm now running in build 1.0.4, which is not quite out yet on Steam. The earlier videos in this series were all made in a pre-release version. And there was a mistake in the earlier videos. At the time when I made those videos, the give command was called drop. And so some people noticed that it said drop in the scripts and they didn't work. And the reason why is we renamed it to give so that it matches. If we select a drone here, we renamed it to give because if I go here, that's what it says in the UI here. And we want the commands in the text scripting language to match the commands on the screen. So that's what happened there. In addition, let's see, I have flattened a bunch of area here. So I'm in sort of transition at this point in this save. I've gotten to the point where I've unlocked the blast furnace. Blast furnaces are a more efficient way of processing copper and iron, or copper and iron. Yep. And so I want to replace these two kilns with blast furnaces. That's kind of the large goal. And at that point, I might as well revamp the whole base in a structure that's designed for the late game or for getting into the late game. So I'm going to need to flatten a whole bunch more terrain to plan for a bigger base and start redesigning this in a way that's good for much of the rest of the game. So that's where we're headed, not in this video, but in the next one. In terms of the structure of this base, because some people asked me about that, I kind of skipped over that in the earlier videos. You'll see these two purple storages here. This is the input, and this is the output. And the green one over here is a bit of output too. But this one, so if you think about a game, like a lot of factory games that have this concept of a mall, I learned that term from Catherine of Sky when I was learning from her how to play Factorio. But the idea is this is the storage where all of your building supplies go, everything you're going to use to make your factory. And in Factorio, I would always, every time I played that game through, I would build a mall, and then I didn't have to worry about handcrafting any of the things I built with. And Satisfactory and Dyson Project, I think both have similar concepts. I know I've had like big central buildings in Satisfactory that are full of all the items you need for building stuff, kind of places where you collect stuff. And here in Icaria, because we do these mixed belts with requests and conveyors, we don't put each individual item in separate storages. At least I don't. You can. I mean, that's certainly an option. And in fact, when we get into the bigger base, there'll be places where I will do that. But for the actual mall, I don't usually do that. I put the whole thing in one storage because 20,000 storage is plenty enough for all the items I'm going to need for building. And so I've set all the requests up to say how much I want of each item. I'm a little bit short here on trusses and concrete, which is what I need to be able to build the larger base. Pretty much everything else I'm going to have plenty of, but I'm short on iron, which means I'm short on trusses. So that's something I'm going to have to fix before going into the bigger storage. The other end here, this other purple storage is the input to the factory. And the idea here is I can put anything I want to into the input and it'll get processed by these buildings and eventually turned into whatever I want it is for the output. And again, in the next playthrough, not next playthrough, but when I rebuild the factory, I'll talk in much more detail about how I do that, how I connect the input to the output in such a way that the output has what I need in it, and that the input never backs up. The other design is to make it so that things can always flow through and you have intermediate storage for various different components. You sort of want to design so that you never back up here. So things always come into the input and flow through and have some place to go. And so that's a lot of what will go into the design of the factory. But that's not this episode, that's the next one. But you will see that I have a path on the conveyor belts that goes all the way through the factory like this and up and around and goes into the output. And the reason for that is when I start tearing these buildings down, like this has got some mudstone in it. If I tear this building down with my drones and they put all the stuff that they get in here, then my mall gets full of mudstone, which I don't really want in my mall. So if I put all the items in here, you'll see I have set this storage up to accept drone and disassembly items. Then as I tear things down, the parts that I get sorted by the conveyor belt network, and only the things that actually belong in the mall end up in the mall. See, this one's got drone disassembly items, reject. Later in the game, once we have rovers, I'll hook up a rover dock up here and a rover here, and then I have a mobile construction supply in a rover that I can carry around to wherever I'm doing building. And I'll have a dock here where I can input things to my factory. And so the rover supply will take whatever I need to build, take what I've torn down, dump it back into the front, and then go collect over here. And that way my drones, when they're building, don't have to travel so far. So that's kind of the general idea. And again, we'll go through all of that in future episodes. But the next project is to flatten. And flattening, because I want to pave with limestone, I want to make sure that I'm feeding most of the stuff I take from tearing this down. I'm going to feed into the factory and get turned into concrete mostly, and sometimes like the biomass. But I want to pull off the limestone and put it in a separate storage so that I have it available for when I'm rebuilding the surface and I want to repave with limestone. So the idea here is we're building a junction here where we take the limestone off here and into this yellow storage, and then run everything else into the factory. Now there's a key bit about the design here, which is sort of the theme of this, is what we want to do is we want to set this up as a priority splitter. Because if I just set a request for limestone here, which is I've already got this request for 1,000 limestone, and I have a request for limestone here, which I have as well, then this junction will by default split items evenly. It'll take half the limestone and send it this way and half the limestone and put it that way. But what I really want to do is I want to keep feeding limestone into this storage until it has all it wants and then send things the other way. And that would be what a priority splitter would do. And for that, we actually need to script some conveyor belts. And so that's kind of where we're headed. We're going to walk into how to do text scripting with item sets and requests, which are the two different data structures that are used for items, and how to script a conveyor belt so you can customize the way it behaves. To get started, I set up these two little storages here as kind of a playground to test so we can walk through how, among other things, how to recreate the behavior you get. There's the standard behavior for conveyor belts. If you put one down, it does this process of respecting the request of the thing that's in front of it. But if you're going to script it, you have to build that yourself. And so we're going to walk through how that works and generally how items work in the text scripting language. So I come over here. First thing I do is I switch the conveyor settings over to scriptable. When it's marked as scriptable, the conveyor belt shows as red if the script is not running. There was a day when we didn't have simple mode and all conveyor belts were scripted. And so it was really helpful to see when you'd stopped a conveyor belt and it wasn't running. It's a little bit less important now. And the next thing we do is we go over to the text language like that. Well, when I do a take command on a conveyor belt, it takes and puts one item on the conveyor belt like this. So if I say take limestone, like that, let's see if I can actually spell things properly. Then I can run this script and it takes one, I'm going to slow this down so we can see what's going on here. Not half speed, one speed. Right? So if I say take limestone, it moves one item across. So now I've got one over here and 14 over here. I can also say take limestone dot one. So what that does is this, the limestone that's here is limestone one, right? And if I just say limestone, it's the equivalent of the wildcard version, which takes all types of limestone. But if I say limestone dot one and then run this, then it moves one item as well, right? So this is an item, it's an item set, right? And so if I could build item sets by adding items together. So like if I wanted to add copper to the mask like so, I could do that. And this would take limestone one and copper. And that's equivalent of building the item masks or the item sets in the UI. And so you add things together and that's how you accumulate. So the other thing we can do is we can pass in a request instead. And a request is items with counts. So here it says take one limestone one. And if I do this, surprise, surprise, it takes one limestone one. But if I set this to 2, like so, and I run it, it still only takes one item. And the reason for that is that the way we treat requests is each time we do a take, we take the item if the number is greater than 0. So if I put a 0 in here and I run this, then it doesn't take anything at all. And you'll see the little red arrow saying it couldn't take anything. And it'll be clear why that works in a minute. This is how requests work in general. And so if we're here now, I've got 4 of these here. So, and I've got set this up already, 4 out of 15. I've got a request of 15 items there. I'm going to take this request and reduce it down to 10, like so. And then what we're going to do is so what does this do? The way a conveyor belt, so this is the little yellow thing here, that's the conveyor belt loader. The loader doesn't have storage. So what it treats as its storage is a combination of all the items that are in the storage that it's loading into and anything that's on the conveyor belt. And in fact, if there are multiple conveyor belts into the storage, it considers all the conveyor belts feeding the storage, not just this one. And we'll get into the reason for that in a little bit. So if I say take this dot request and then run it, it takes 1 limestone. But what we want to do here is we want to take this dot request minus this dot storage, like so. So this is the place where the magic happens, right? Because it takes into account what's on the conveyor belt. So this dot request is essentially the request just for the storage, right? It's the same. This dot request is the same as the storage that it's feeding. And if I do this again, it moves 1 item. But if I now repeat this, like so. Oops, oh, I can't do that because I'm not in text. So what we're going to do is we're in text mode. So we to play this like so and say repeat or just play this action like so. It starts taking items and we end up with 10 items in the storage, which is the number we requested. So the idea here is that when this dot request minus this dot storage goes to 0, it stops taking items. So that's the way requests work. It's the idea is the storage is a request type. And at the point when I've got 10 limestone here and I've got 10 limestone here, this goes to 0 and then the take command stops taking items. So that's the whole theory behind scripting conveyor belts in a nutshell. So, and this, roughly speaking right here, is the same behavior as you get from the default behavior for a conveyor belt if you put it in simple mode. If we're going to do a priority splitter, is we want to leave a few items in this storage. Because what happens here is if we've got only 1 limestone in this storage here, and we're going to split things, we want to make sure that this guy gets first chance to get it. So the idea is I'm going to have this conveyor belt not take the last couple, I usually use 2 for this, the last 2 items out of the storage. So what happens is that as long as there are 2 or fewer items in here, the items will only go this direction. And it's only when the number of items goes over 2 that it starts sending this way. So the idea is when this backs up, suddenly the number of items that are in this storage will increase, and then this one will get them instead. So that's the theory. So we'll see how that works in a minute here. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, so this is a bit of a subtle expression, like so. So the next thing to do is we're going to take the minimum of, if I for instance just say 1 or 3 limestone like that. Like so, then what I'm doing is I'm saying, well, I'm going to take, this is always going to be, this will be either 3 or whatever I get out of the difference from here, and it doesn't change the behavior. But what I'm going to do here instead is I'm going to say this dot source dot storage. So the source, when I say this dot source, what that's actually referring to is the source is the item that the conveyor belt is taking things from. So it's this storage. So this is the blue storage, and this dot source is the green storage. And so we're going to say, and so this doesn't really do anything at the moment, because what happens is that this will stop taking this dot storage goes to 0 on limestone at the point when this has no limestone in it, which isn't quite what we want. So what we'll do is we'll do this. We'll say -2 lime 1, like so. So now what happens is that the count of limestone.1 goes to 0 at the point when this dot storage has 2 limestone in it because of the subtraction. So this term goes to 0 at the point when we've taken everything except for the last 2 limestone. And this is going to be the magic for how we make the priority splitter. And so if I run this and let it go, oh, did I leave? Oh, I see. I have to set the request up here. So like 15, like so. And then what happens is it only moves 3 items, and we get a 13 here, and then we end up with 2 here. And so the idea here is now we've left 2 items behind, and if I had another conveyor belt going over here, then these items, they would have a chance to go this way. So I'm going to just take this same script like so. Let's just stop it. put it here on this conveyor belt. Oops. So again, we'll take everything that's requested up here. So what this overall script is doing is it's saying, hey, take items that are requested by this storage, which is pretty much everything because it's feeding my whole factory. But don't take the last two limestone.1 out of this. And so then what I do is I turn what we're going to do here. What did I do here? I left this set with the filter on. So what we're going to do here is take this script and start it running like so. And then I take this and let it start. If we look inside my crane, I've already been doing some flattening here. I've got a bunch of granite in here because if you look sort of what this is built out of, this is a mixture of granite, it's a mixture of limestone. My crane is now completely full or mostly full. And so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, turn the filter off like so, and now it starts moving items. And what I did here is I restricted the request here to 1,000. Again, I would use a medium storage for this because I'm probably going to want more than 1,000 of them for paving. But for the demo here, what I've done is limited this to 1,000 so we can see what happens when it backs up. And the other thing is that this is running kind of slow here. I'm going to take this request and increase it so that we can fill more of the conveyor belt. Again, remember when I was talking about this idea that when the request system pays attention, or a conveyor belt pays attention to how many items there includes the items that are on the belt, I have to have the size of the request here be large enough that I can actually fill the conveyor belt. And so if you think about it, the request is set here is set to 25. That means this loader here is counting all the items that are on the belt and the items in here. And we do that because then we know we can never end up with more than 25 items in this storage, right? The idea behind setting the request to 25 is you should never see more than 25. And if this was only paying attention to the storage here, then it could put the extra items on here are going to eventually end up in here, and you can end up over 25. Similarly, that's the reason why conveyor belts always count all conveyor belts that are feeding it, because it basically says at the point when this loader has loaded on this conveyor belt, that item is committed to go into this storage. It doesn't have anywhere else to go. And so when we set up requests like so, the idea is to make sure that we never go past what the request is. If you say 25, it's not only a request, it's also a limit. It just says I should never have more than 25 in here. And so all the accounting is done to guarantee that. So let's let this run, and then we can actually crank this up here because we don't really worry about overflowing, things like that. That conveyor belt holds more than 40 items. There we go, 45. There we go. And you'll see that now these are going over here, and the number of items are building up here, and it's going to take a little bit. I might cut a bit so you don't have to wait and watch the number go up. But what we hope to see then, if I've gotten this all right, is at the point when this fills up, the limestone will start going this direction instead. And that's what we were going for. We're looking for a priority splitter. As long as there's room over here, all items go this way. Up, come on. There we go. And you see all of a sudden it switches. This one's full now, and then the items go this way instead. So that's the idea behind priority splitters. Again, now all of a sudden our bandwidth is limited because of the size of the request here. We can't put more than 50 items on this conveyor belt. But that's the idea. And so that should hopefully give you a sense of how to write code for conveyor belts and how to customize how things move around in your factory. And it can be really handy if you're trying to build a factory like this that has only one input and one output, and you're trying to think about how you want to process all the items that come into it. Being able to build priority splitters could be useful for that. And there's lots of other things you can do with it as well. But that's the basic idea. Anyhow, I think that's enough for this one. Probably we're going to get into, I don't know whether I'm going to do the next video on flattening and how to repave, or whether I'm just going to go in and talk about how to rebuild the factory and factory design in general. Or maybe both. We'll see. I'll get there soon. Anyhow, see you in the next one.